Henry Mitchell sat by the small swimming pool in his backyard, watching his wife Jessica and their best friend Fred frolic in the surf of the Gulf of Mexico. In previous days, as he observed their playful antics, he would also take in his surroundings and feel an overwhelming sense of pride. He would reflect on how they had realized a significant part of their childhood dreams, escaping the cold, dreary winters of their birthplace in the frigid north to live a sun-drenched life in Florida. But today, his thoughts were far from their triumphant escape to this slice of paradise. Watching Jessica and Fred now filled him with unease, reigniting memories of rumors that had lingered since high school and persisted to this day. He ignored the serene beauty around him to focus solely on what was unfolding in the surf and sand. Up until the middle of last week, he had genuinely loved both Jess and Fred more than anyone else. He had trusted them with his life, his happiness, even his soul. They were almost inseparable. If one was sad, they all were. If one was hurting, they all felt the pain. But now he realized that the trust and love he had placed in them were misplaced. Henry, Jess, and Fred had met on their first day of middle school, all assigned to the same homeroom. They quickly hit it off, forming a bond that lasted through high school and into college for Henry and Jess. Fred, on the other hand, was a quintessential slacker, a beach bum even before he had a beach to call home. He lacked ambition, always dressed like a surfer dude, and peppered his speech with surfer slang and drug culture jargon. Henry had never known Fred was involved with substances, but Fred was indeed well versed in substance use and alcohol abuse. Despite his carefree lifestyle, women were inexplicably drawn to him, flocking around like bees to honey. Fred was a handsome, tanned young man who had a knack for saying the right things to women, and he could seduce nearly any woman he wanted. Until recently, Henry believed Fred had kept his desires in check when it came to his best friend's wife, but now he knew better. The trio had graduated high school together and applied to colleges in Florida, prioritizing location over reputation or degree programs. Accepted by the same college, they had moved in together to start their higher education. Fred, however, flunked out after just one semester and declared college wasn't for him. He relocated to the beaches near Fort Myers, Florida, living hand to mouth while his friends completed their degrees, visiting them nearly every weekend and most summers. During Henry and Jess's college years, Fred worked various part-time jobs near the beach. He had stints with a pool company, local beachside businesses, and a beach rental shop where he excelled. He could rent sand to an Arab, as Henry liked to joke, believing Fred's success lay in his surfer dude chatter that charmed tourists into making rentals or purchases. Fred primarily worked at a beach rental company owned by Henry's employer, which had a small retail store attached to a larger tool and equipment rental outlet where Henry worked. The store where Fred worked mainly sold used beach rental equipment, but also offered everything from chairs to swimsuits, sunscreen, and drinks. Jessica and Henry both pursued business degrees in college. Jessica specialized in marketing, while Henry had a dual major in management information systems and business management. Upon graduation, they quickly secured jobs. Henry started in the equipment rental industry for Fred's employer, swiftly rising to the position of store manager and acting as the owner's second-in-command. Jessica landed a role selling clothing at a beachside boutique and rapidly advanced to assistant manager. Remarkably, all three friends worked within half a mile of each other and saw each other daily. Given that Henry and Fred worked for the same employer, they often saw or spoke to each other several times throughout the day. Fred frequently made a point of telling Henry that he and Jessica had lunch together. With their businesses located on the same block, they even spent most of their breaks together. Rumors swirled once more about Fred and Jessica, but Henry chose to ignore them. After all, they had been friends since childhood, and he trusted both of them. Jessica had previously dated Fred but deemed him unsuitable for marriage, ultimately choosing Henry. So, why should he worry? Fred had one true passion aside from women and the beach: Mustang automobiles. Whenever the conversation turned to cars, he was in the thick of it, especially if it involved the Ford Mustang. His first car was a Mustang, as were all his subsequent vehicles. Eventually, he saved enough to purchase a new Mustang, not just any Mustang, but a Shelby in ruby red metallic with black accents. When he wasn't chasing girls or enjoying the beach, he spent his free time cleaning, pampering, and modifying his cherished Mustang. Jessica was the first to ride in his new car and was frequently seen with him thereafter. Henry reminisced about the good times when he and his best friends would take road trips, go camping, or just hang out. Jessica had always been there for both of them, but she was his. She insisted she was just friends with Fred. However, it now seemed she had been more than just a friend back then. She never admitted to being a friend with benefits, but that apparently was the case and still was. It was only recently that Henry finally faced the truth of her disrespect and infidelity. He realized the rumors over the years were true. Henry almost regretted volunteering to deliver another set of rental scaffolding to a job site on the day he discovered the betrayal. Feeling bored, and with the renter's urgent request for immediate delivery, Henry agreed to take on the task. If not for that, he might have remained blissfully ignorant a while longer. He would never have known the rumors were true. As he recalled the sight of their not-so-innocent activities in the surf, his stomach clenched with anger once again. How could he have been so blind? Everything was now crystal clear. The day his life fell apart was a beautiful Tuesday. The store was slow, so when an order for scaffolding came through, Henry told Mr. Parker he handled the delivery himself rather than ask the driver to stay late. It saved them some overtime pay and gave Henry a chance to get out for a bit. A win-win situation, or so he thought. After making the delivery, he decided to take the scenic route back, passing by the stretch of beach road where both Jessica and Fred worked. Just as he drove past Fred's small, almost shack-like building, he witnessed Jessica meeting Fred with a steamy kiss. Fred's hands roamed under her loose blouse, fondling her breasts before he hurriedly rushed her through the door. As she giggled and wiggled under his touch, she turned and pulled him inside, sealing her actions with another passionate kiss. She clearly initiated this time. Fred quickly placed a "closed for lunch" sign on the door and followed Jessica deeper into the building. She was laughing and eagerly pulling him by the hand. Henry, shocked and furious, pulled his new F-150 into the parking lot beside Fred's Mustang. He ran towards the building and peered inside, but the lights were off and the door was locked. They were either in the stockroom or had left through the back door. Determined to confront them, Henry moved to the rear of the building and positioned a garbage can under a high, grimy window. Climbing onto the can, he could barely see part of the room. He heard voices but couldn't make out the words. Frustrated, he jumped down and stacked a couple of pallets under the garbage can to get a better view. When he climbed back up, he saw Jessica and Fred fully engaged in a heated, intimate encounter. His heart shattered in an instant. He pulled out his phone and snapped several pictures before climbing down and walking away from the building, seething with anger and betrayal. His mind swirled with chaotic thoughts he couldn't later recall clearly. In a matter of moments, his seemingly perfect life lay in ruins, marred by the painful discovery on that otherwise beautiful day. When Henry returned to work, his boss, Mr. Parker, noticed something was seriously wrong. Henry refused to discuss it, offering only a cryptic comment. "I just realized things aren't always what you expect or believe them to be. I found out this afternoon that I was mistaken about something I thought I knew. Now I have to rethink my whole outlook on life." Henry shook himself from the haunting memories of the past week and refocused on the distressing scene in front of him, his wife Jessica and former best friend Fred cavorting like carefree teenagers in the breaking waves. Jessica's gleeful screams and giggles intertwined with Fred's deep laughter cut through Henry's heart. He observed them, crafting and discarding endless plans, before casting a pained glance around the house and yard he had grown so fond of. Losing this place would hurt deeply, perhaps even more than the betrayal of Frederick and almost as much as the loss of Jessica. At least it was only a rental. Now he felt a twisted sense of relief that they hadn't saved enough for a down payment and had settled on a lease-to-purchase agreement instead. Lost in his brooding thoughts, Henry barely noticed Jessica running back into the yard, pulling Fred along with her. Her radiant, effervescent personality that had once drawn him in was now a bitter reminder of her unfaithfulness. Her constant cheer and lovability had been endearing, but now he realized he should have questioned her devotion when she continued to share those traits with others even after their engagement and marriage. He had dismissed it as her natural personality, but now he knew better. She was a flirt and a cheat. As Jessica approached, still flushed from her romp in the waves, she finally dropped Fred's hand. "Honey, why the sour look? It's a beautiful day, and we're all together. Why do you look so down?" she asked, leaning in for a kiss that Henry partly avoided. "Oh, nothing you don't know about, Jess. Just thinking about last week and a problem I uncovered at work. I'll figure it out and get back to normal soon, I expect. So why are you in such a good mood this afternoon?" Henry replied with a forced calm. Jessica's smile faltered slightly as she glanced at Fred before responding. Henry noted the depth in her gaze, a look that finally betrayed its true meaning. "Well, we're all together, and Fred and I had a really fun swim. Now we're ready for a nice meal and some relaxing time together. What are you going to cook for us this evening?" "Oh, was I elected cook again today? Seems like it happens a lot, even when we're at Fred's place. Doesn't seem right to me, does it to you? Anyway, I haven't planned anything because I've been preoccupied. I guess you and Fred will have to come up with something. Or maybe we can just make some sandwiches." Henry's voice veiled his growing tension with a thin layer of indifference. "Henry, how could you?" Jessica exclaimed, eyes sparkling as she grabbed Fred's hand. "You always fix us a nice meal. That's part of the fun on the weekends, watching you cook and then enjoying the meal as the sun sets. I can't believe you just sat there and let it slip by. Now what should we do?" She turned to Henry, an idea lighting up her face. "I know. You can chill some wine and set the table while Fred takes me for a ride in his Shelby. We'll pick up some takeout from that fabulous new downtown restaurant and eat out here on the patio. It's the perfect night to try it." Jessica hurried into their bedroom, swapping her clothes for a sundress and sandals in record time. Emerging onto the patio, she flashed a bright smile and said, "Come on, Fred. Time to hit the road." She grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the front door and the parked cars. Turning back to Henry, her eyes sparkling, she said, "We probably won't be back for about an hour and a half, honey. They need time to prepare the food once we get there. I'll call you when we're leaving." Henry stood in disbelief as he watched the front door close behind them. He heard the rumble of the Shelby coming to life, followed by the chirp of tires as Fred accelerated away. Henry couldn't wrap his mind around what had just happened. Although similar scenarios had played out in the past, this time felt different, more blatant. Fred and Jessica had always found excuses to run errands together after wrestling or horsing around, a habit dating back to middle school. He and Jess had also taken off alone occasionally back then, but he now suspected that Jess and Fred's relationship had crossed boundaries. Since getting married, Henry and Jess didn't need to run off to find privacy. They could simply retire to their bedroom or wait until Fred left. Henry sighed and returned to his patio chair with his glass and bottle of Balvenie. He didn't even bother chilling the wine or setting out plates and silverware. An hour and a half later, a giggling Jessica called to say they were on their way back. But Henry remained unmoved, lost in his thoughts and the steady flow of alcohol. When the two returned nearly 2 hours later, he still hadn't left his chair, aside from a brief trip to the yard. Jessica's laughter and chatter filled the house as she and Fred tromped noisily through it and burst into the kitchen. When she stepped onto the patio, her mood shifted instantly. She looked at the still unset table and turned to Henry, her voice bridging irritation and incredulity. "Henry, what in the world have you been doing? I thought you were going to chill wine and set the table. It doesn't even look like you've moved since we left. What's wrong with you today? Hurry up and set the table. We're famished." Henry gazed at Jessica with a profound sadness but chose to remain silent. Her disheveled appearance spoke volumes: mussed hair, puffy red lips, and nipples clearly visible through her thin top, indicating she was no longer wearing a bra. He was certain she had one on when they left. It was evident that their errand had been more eventful than just picking up dinner. Jessica didn't seem to notice Henry's sorrowful look and continued to berate him. Meanwhile, Fred unpacked the meal onto the table, avoiding eye contact with Henry. Slowly, Henry stood and walked into the kitchen without a word. He returned carrying only his plate and silverware, quickly loading it with the delicious-smelling food. He started eating before Jessica, now fuming, stormed into the house to fetch her and Fred's utensils and plates. As she returned, she lashed out at Henry once more for not setting the table. Henry looked up at her and calmly said, "Look, I'm tired and hungry. You both managed to walk into the kitchen to get your utensils and plates. It didn't take much effort, so I let you do it." Without waiting for her response, he turned back to his meal. After filling his plate, Fred sat across from Henry and took a few bites before speaking up. "Dude, this is so unfair. Why are you coming down on us like this? You didn't even cook, yet you act all superior when we go out and get some decent food, and then you won't even help serve it. This isn't like you at all, man. We're supposed to be bros. You gotta have my back here and pitch in, you know? It's pretty disrespectful to that sweet woman of yours to leave her hanging like that." Henry felt a surge of anger as he glanced at Jessica, who looked guilty and avoided eye contact by staring at her plate. He then turned his attention back to Fred and said, "Fred, I don't see why it's any of your business what I do in my own house. You're used to me covering all the expenses and running around for everyone. That's going to change. I want to relax on the weekends too, just like you and Jess do. I'm done doing everything for you. It's time you started pulling your own weight." Jessica gasped and looked up at Henry in shock. Henry turned to her and asked, "What? Do you have a problem with that, honey?" "Well, it's just, you know Fred doesn't make enough to cover his own expenses when we do things together. He can barely manage his car payment and rent. We've always looked out for each other. Why are you trying to change things now?" "All right, let's be clear. We're all adults here with our own responsibilities, correct?" Jess murmured yes. "Therefore, when we're together, we should support one another, and when we're apart, we should bear our own expenses. When someone's a guest in a home, it's customary to offer help, though it's not mandatory to provide food for the host. What I've observed is that every time we gather, you and Fred enjoy yourselves while I handle all the cooking, serving, and cleaning. I'm also expected to cover the costs of the food. This setup is far from equal, and I'm tired of the disparity and unfairness in our relationship." Unsurprisingly, the evening devolved into heated arguments, accusations, and resentment. Henry wasn't ready to reveal his true reason for taking a firm stance on the friendship/relationship, but Jess and Fred sensed his anger. Over the next 2 weeks, Henry spent considerable time observing Jess and Frederick. He frequently caught them kissing and getting close, documenting their interactions during work hours multiple times each week. By his estimates, Jess and Fred were spending more time together than he and Jess ever did. By the end of the second week, Henry walked into the owner's office and said, "Sir, I've crunched some numbers over the past week and discovered a way to significantly boost our profits. I recommend closing the store and beach rental unit and letting Fred go." Mr. Baker shot Henry a sharp look, frowning. "I thought Fred was your friend, Henry. Why would you recommend closing his store and firing him? Couldn't we use another employee here at the rental center? Isn't that a better option than just terminating his job?" "In most situations, that might indeed be a better option, sir. However, in this case, it would be counterproductive," Henry responded, leaning forward to hand Mr. Baker a copy of his figures. "I have several reasons for my recommendation, sir. First and foremost is the store's performance. During the busy tourist season, it does well and adds to our bottom line. However, in the off-season, it doesn't even cover operating expenses. If we only operated the store from mid-April through mid-September, we would capture 89% of its annual profits. I recommend either leasing or selling the building and lot. Alternatively, we could operate only from April through September. I've provided financial details for both options. If we sell or rent the building, we could reserve a portion of the lot for a mobile store that operates during those 5 months, thereby generating higher profits when factoring in lease income. Moreover, selling the building would allow us to reinvest the funds into purchasing new rental equipment or increasing interest income. Lastly, keeping Fred employed would ultimately harm the business due to his personal life and work habits." Henry then slid an envelope toward Mr. Baker. I discovered that Fred has been closing the store during working hours to have personal rendezvous with a woman in a storage room. This amounts to theft from the business, as he continues to get paid for that time. I've documented 7 instances over the past 2 weeks where the store was closed for nearly an hour in the mid-afternoon, in addition to his authorized lunch break. These unauthorized closures have negatively impacted the business due to potential unknown lost sales and rentals. Additionally, I can no longer work with him. I'm not issuing an ultimatum, sir, but if he continues to be employed here, I will seek employment elsewhere. What? I can't believe this. You, Fred, and Jessica have been friends. No, closer than friends, for most of your lives. Yes, it seemed that way, at least on the surface. But I've recently discovered that things were not as I believed. Fred is certainly not my friend, and Jessica will soon no longer be my wife. The contents of that envelope explain why, sir. Mr. Baker frowned, casting a hard look at Henry before opening the envelope. As he looked at the first picture, he inhaled sharply. Skimming through the rest, he looked up at Henry. Son, I don't know what to say. I understand why you can't work with Fred and why Jessica won't be your wife much longer. But I'm concerned about your desire to close the beach rental business. Is this a sound business decision, or is it driven by revenge? Henry sighed and replied, I anticipated you would think that, sir. While what happened between Jess and Fred undoubtedly influences my feelings, the decision is grounded in practicality. I believe any accountant would support my recommendation. That store is only marginally profitable each year, and the funds tied up in it could be better utilized elsewhere. My calculations show the operation only contributes about $600 per month on average to your bottom line. Renting out the building or investing the sale proceeds would yield far greater returns. The business accounting firm reviewed Henry's assessment and found it accurate. In fact, their evaluation was even more critical. Factoring in everything, including the depreciation and insurance Henry had overlooked, continuing to operate the store resulted in a net loss. Consequently, the store was closed and Fred was dismissed. On the day of Fred's termination, Henry instructed his attorney to serve Jessica with divorce papers. He spent the morning moving out of their rented house and into a small apartment within walking distance of his job. While he was at work that day, Jessica called. Though he hesitated to answer, he decided it was best to get the unpleasant conversation over with. His stomach churned as he answered, Hello, Jessica. What do you want? He braced himself for the inevitable tirade about the divorce. Instead, she asked, Did you know about this mess? Why didn't you tell us that Brad, Mr. Baker, was going to close the beachfront store and fire Fred? I thought we were all friends. How could you let this happen? Couldn't you at least have convinced Brad to transfer Fred to your store? He was already struggling with rent and car payments. Now he has no income. I've told him he can move in with us until things get better. Can you come early to help him move? No, I don't think so. Mr. Baker and I visited the store several times during business hours and found it closed. Fred was nowhere to be found. The store wasn't even breaking even, so Brad decided to close it. As for helping Fred move, there's no way I'm doing that. I have to go. About 30 minutes later, Jessica called again. This time Henry answered, wishing he hadn't. She started screaming as soon as she heard his voice. Henry, how could you? You got Fred fired, didn't you? And now you're divorcing me. How could you do this? We've been together forever, and now you're just dropping us and cutting us out of your life. Well, Jess, how could you cheat on me? How could you sleep with him and not expect me to leave you both? What? I didn't cheat on you. I never have and never will. What made you think that? Maybe because I have pictures of you and Fred together. Maybe because I saw you kissing him. Maybe those things made me think you were cheating. Henry, I have never, not once, allowed another man or woman to do that. Not once. Then what did you do with Fred? It wasn't cheating. Well, I suppose it was, but I prefer to think we were making love just like you and I do. Oh, Henry, how could you? Henry, I thought you understood. It's always been the 3 of us. We've been together since grade school. You know I've loved you both dearly. You've both told me and each other you love us. Henry, You've always known Fred and I share something special, just like you and I do. Surely you're not divorcing me because of Fred. Honey, I love you. I love Fred. I've always known I would marry you. Fred needs us to live, and we need Fred to be happy too. If you loved Fred enough to sleep with him, why did you marry me? You are more stable. You can support the children better when we have them. Fred can't even pay his own way, but he's special to us. The three of us make a great team and will be so good with the children when they come. Fred can teach them how to live and love life. I can mother and nurture them, and you can teach them responsibility and work ethics. Don't you see? What we have makes a perfect whole. When Fred falls short, you can make it up, and we all live better, just like we do now. No, Jessica, I don't see it. I guess I never did. Goodbye, Jessica. Henry slammed the phone down, trembling with rage, face flushed. The revelation hit him like a ton of bricks. She'd been sleeping with both of them and even used their income to cover Fred's bills. How could he have been so blindsided? Unsurprisingly, Jessica quickly offered Fred to move in with her. Despite this new arrangement, Fred still struggled to keep up with his car payments. 2 months after the split, Fred strolled into Henry's store late one afternoon. Henry marched around the counter to confront him, ready to kick him out. Before he could utter a word, Fred pleaded, "Dude, you gotta help me. They're trying to take my car. Jess covered the payment last month, but we're tapped out now. Can you float me a loan, man?" Henry's face hardened. "You slept with my wife. Prove you were never my friend. And now you have the nerve to ask me for money for your damn car. Get out before I beat the crap out of you." "Whoa, dude, chill with the bad vibes. Sure, I was with your wife, but you were nailing mine too. She was with both of us. We thought you knew and were cool with it. But this is different, man. We've always had each other's back. I need your help bad, dude. We can deal with everything else later." Henry paused, then smiled. "Maybe I can help you after all, Fred. Let me clock out, and we can go to your bank and handle this." Fred's face lit up. He clapped Henry on the back, grinning. "Righteous dude. I knew I could count on you." They arrived at the bank holding the loan on Fred's car and asked to see a loan officer. Once seated, the officer asked how she could assist. Henry spoke up. "I understand you hold the loan on Fred Robinson's Mustang. He's behind on payments, and you're looking at repossessing it. I've agreed to take over the payments to prevent that. Is that okay?" "Well, I'm not sure." Fred interrupted. "Whoa there, dude. I didn't say I was giving up my ride. I just needed a loan to cover the payments." Henry turned to the loan officer. "Excuse us for a moment, please. I need to explain this to Fred." He pulled Fred aside. "Fred, I'm putting the loan and car in my name so I can make the payments. This way we handle the car situation, and you avoid any credit issues." Fred relaxed, then smiled. "Oh, cool. Right on. Let's get it done." The loan officer took Henry's information and ran a credit check. She smiled when she finished. "I see no issue with you taking over the payments on Mr. Robinson's car, Mr. Mitchell. I can also handle the title transfer for you to submit to the state. Let me complete a few forms and get some signatures, and we'll sort everything out." She quickly left to fetch the paperwork. After she left, Fred straightened up and turned to Henry. "Dude, what's this about changing the title to your name? I told you I can't lose my ride." "Relax, Fred. For this to be legal, the banks and the government require it. You know how it goes. It's their way or the highway." Fred sighed in relief. "Yeah, I don't get any of their rules. I was just worried about my ride. We're cool." In about 45 minutes, Fred had signed over his car to Henry, who promptly paid the overdue amount. Once they were in Henry's truck, Fred reverted to his old self, testing Henry's patience. Back at the store, Fred darted out of the truck, heading straight for the driver's side. With a grin, he said, "Hey man, I scored some killer weed yesterday. Let's go roll a couple of J's and celebrate. I've got a dime bag in the car." "I can't right now, Fred. I need to finish the paperwork for your car," Henry replied. "Oh, cool. I thought we were done with that." "Yeah, hurry up so I don't lose it, man." "Catch ya later, dude." Fred lit up a joint before driving out of the parking lot. Henry followed shortly after, heading to the DMV to complete the transfer of Fred's car title. Henry was so pleased with his subterfuge that he was nearly dancing with joy. He quickly wrapped up the transaction, paid the necessary fees, and left the building with a smile. 2 weeks later, Henry received his final divorce papers in the mail. The process had been relatively painless. Jessica and he earned roughly the same amount, so there were no maintenance payments. Their savings were minimal, and they each kept their own vehicles and personal belongings. No fuss, no muss. Henry removed his name from the lease of the small beachfront house they had cherished, freeing himself from her. He did, however, miss that house. Late on the Saturday night after receiving the decree, or, more accurately, early Sunday morning, Henry rode one of the rental beach bikes to his old home. Quietly and cautiously, he unlocked the door. Luckily, Jess hadn't changed the locks or asked for the key back, and slipped inside. He smiled when he saw what he expected: the keys to the Mustang on the table. He picked them up quickly, but then had another thought. I wonder where the other set of keys is. He moved to the cabinet where Jess always kept her purse and found the Mustang key fob on her keychain. He took it too and exited the house as quietly as he had entered. Henry walked up to the Mustang in the driveway and opened the door. Now came the tricky part. He needed to start and drive it away with minimal fuss. The car was notoriously loud. He grimaced when he turned the key, though he couldn't deny how great the engine sounded. As quietly as possible, Henry backed out of the driveway and drove down the street toward his home. He planned to return with his truck to pick up the bike once he got home, then wait for the inevitable commotion. After finishing his lunch on Sunday, Henry received a frantic call from Fred. His friend was speaking so quickly that Henry could barely understand him. Henry, dude, it's totally bogus, man. Someone stole my ride. You gotta help me, dude. What am I gonna do, man? Calm down, Fred. Just chill. There's nothing I can do for you. Henry hung up on the still babbling Fred and sat back in his chair, smiling. By this time, Fred had found a part-time job working for a pool company. During the following week, Henry made a point of driving the Mustang past the business address when Fred should be getting off work. On Thursday, he arrived just as Fred was getting into Jessica's car for the trip home. Henry smiled to himself and honked the horn as he cruised past the two lovers. He could hear Fred's scream of hatred even over the rumble of the engine. With a satisfied grin, he revved the car a little more and disappeared into traffic before Jess could pull onto the street. Late Saturday morning, Henry was waxing his Shelby when a city patrol car pulled up behind him. The officer approached and asked, "Are you Henry Mitchell?" "Yes, officer, I am." "Is there a problem?" Henry responded. "Is this your vehicle, sir?" the officer inquired. "Yes, it is," Henry said, chuckling. "Well, it's partly mine and partly the bank's." The officer's expression turned serious. "Do you have the registration and proof of insurance, please?" "Sure thing." "Just a moment," replied Henry. He reached into the glove compartment, retrieved the requested documents, and handed them over. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked again. "I'll just be a moment," the officer said, walking back to his patrol car to run the information. A few minutes later, he returned and handed the paperwork back. "We received a report from a Mr. Frederick Robinson that his vehicle was stolen. The vehicle identification number he provided matches this one. He claims he saw you driving it and wants us to recover it. The registration and DMV records verify you own this vehicle. Can you explain?" Henry smiled and leaned against the car. "Well, Mr. Robinson couldn't keep up with the payments, so I took over to help maintain his credit. We went to the bank, and I took over his loan and ownership of the vehicle. I'm not sure what his problem is, but he might have been high during the deal or when he reported it stolen. We were friends, but after my divorce, he sided with my ex-wife, so we're not as close. I allowed him to use the car for 2 more weeks before taking it from his place, giving him time to make other arrangements." "So you're saying he's possibly using substances and causing trouble because of your divorce?" the officer asked. "No, sir. I don't know nor care how he feels about the divorce. I'm just saying substances might explain his memory lapse regarding the car's sale." "Okay, sir. Sorry to bother you," the officer concluded. Sunday afternoon, Henry was lounging by the pool when Jessica and Fred barged in. Before he could react, they flipped his chair, sending him onto the hot concrete. "Dude, why did you steal my ride? I need the car back. Give me the keys," Fred demanded. "Look, you came to me for help. I took the car to prevent it from being repossessed. You signed it over to me. Now I have a sweet ride, even if it's not an F-150 4X4. It's a real chick magnet, you know. Fair is fair. We both got a decent vehicle out of the deal, and I got a Mustang for my wife. Seems like I came out ahead. At least I don't have to worry about the Mustang running off with another man." Jessica shrieked and then started crying silently. Fred glared at Henry. "Man, that's totally cold." Henry glanced up at them and said, "Yeah, it is what it is. Now get out of here before I call the cops. I don't want to see either of you again." Thank you for watching my video to the end. Don't forget to give me a like if you like this story and subscribe to my channel. Have a great day and see you soon.